On this episode of Locked On Lightning, we're asking the question, what do the Lightning do at the trade deadline? We talk about all that and more, but first, let's play that music.
You're Locked On Lightning, your daily podcast on the Tampa Bay Lightning. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome to another episode of Locked On Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Danker. I want to thank you all for making us your first listen of the day on this episode of Locked On Lightning. We're discussing what did the Lightning do at the trade deadline? Now, the deadline is a little far, not too far. I mean, it'll sneak up on you like it does every year. We always have this conversation every year. What do the Lightning do? What moves are going to be made? And, the Lightning do have some time. Trade deadline is March 3rd. So we are about a little bit more than a month away. Well, 2 months away. Yeah, a month away. I would say that. My math isn't good. But what I do know that is good is that the Lightning are probably going to make a move. Now, to what degree of, I guess, earth-shattering or how much of a difference it's going to make is going to be very dependent on a couple of things this year. Because the last couple of years, the Lightning have, Julien Brisebois, GM of the Tampa Bay Lightning, has done a very good job of just pulling out these wonderful moves that sometimes we see them coming, sometimes we don't see them coming. For example, Blake Coleman from the Devils in 1920, David Savard a couple of years ago as well, Barclay Goodrow the same year as Coleman, Nick Paul last year. So, the moves have been made to where these moves have made an effect immediately and have shown and have really been the reason why Tampa Bay has won 2 straight Stanley Cup championships and gone to 3 straight Stanley Cup finals. Now, this year has been a little bit different. This year is definitely going to be a little bit different from Tampa Bay. Now, for the rest of the free agent market, I think very well on what teams are willing to give Tampa Bay. Because if you look at Tampa Bay's situation, their cap, and we all know the Lightning are pretty much up against the wall in terms of cap space. Not very much with a lot of room to breathe as of now. Now, the other thing with that, I mean, we're all, like I said, all aware. I mean, it goes to money. How creative is Julien Brisebois going to have to get a good piece to improve this team? And then also in the same breath as that is, what is he willing to give up that is not going to set this team back? Now, we all know last couple of years he's been busting out first round draft picks, second round draft picks. Here you go. You want one, you get one. You get one. Now this year the Lightning are set back. They don't have a first. They don't have a second. They're probably not going to have a good position for third through 7 of this year. They don't have a first round pick for next year as well. Maybe that pick that they got from Chicago for next year, not this upcoming draft, but for 2024, maybe they dangle that carrot in front of some teams. Who knows? Maybe teams are going to bank on Chicago being bad, or the Lightning at least are going to bank on Chicago being bad. Does Julien Brisebois? I mean, it also begs the question, because the Lightning do have all their draft picks for 2025. Do they go that long route to get someone, do they get that route to go down that road to get someone that will have some sort of quality? At the same time, does Julien Brisebois maybe make the decision, we need to start saving these draft picks, maybe stockpiling them? This core isn't going to be young forever. The Lightning's farm system up in Syracuse, listen, they're talented up there. A lot of those players are going to be good top 6 players. Maybe second or third line defenders, but we're not going to see a lot of superstars coming out of Syracuse anytime soon. So does Julien Brisebois say, you know what, this team is good enough. Let me think about the future right now. And the other factor that goes into that whole decision making is the fact that our teams at this point in time willing to, I mean, obviously you're not going to have a trade anytime soon between the Lightning and any of their division rivals. I mean, last year with Ottawa Senators, that was a whole thing. And I think that you might see a trade with that with those guys or maybe Montreal. I mean, Montreal, just looking at their roster, nothing really sticks out to me as a player that the Lightning are going to get in return without giving up a lot. And that's really what the goal is, obviously. But really, the question I'm trying to ask is how many teams are really going to be willing to go out of their way now? Because I'm sure at this point, anybody that is not a Lightning fan, especially a fan of a team that's inside the Atlantic Division and a fan of a team that is definitely in the Eastern Conference, I'm sure there's a lot of people out there in the hockey world that are kind of tired of seeing the Lightning, in 3 straight Stanley Cup finals now. And I'm sure organizations kind of take that into somewhat of an account. Do we want to upset our fans? I mean, how much of a big uproar would that cause, making a trade with the Lightning to help them get better at the deadline, possibly improving their chances of getting back to the Stanley Cup finals? I don't think it would be pitchforks and torches mafia type, angry mob type angry, but I'm sure it would cause some rumblings and some displeasement throughout the fan base and maybe some players in the organization. But yeah, really this year, the Tampa Bay Lightning are going to have to ask a lot to get a lot in return. And I feel like, I didn't realize that until recently, as, we've started the talk about Julien Brisebois fielding those questions, with the trade deadline. Like I said, it's in March, beginning of March, but it'll sneak up on you pretty quickly in the blink of an eye. So what do the Lightning have to give up? I mean, what do they have that's going to look sexy to another team? I mean, we've spoken about Alex Killorn here on the show numerous times as probably at least a piece that would most likely be the player that would be dealt, that would have the most quality and kind of a player that we would imagine because if Killorn's going to go out after this year, is he going to stay with the Lightning if he doesn't get the deal that he wants, or is he going to go somewhere else for more money? My feeling on that is, and I feel like this with a lot of players, because most likely, especially with your franchise guys, you're never going to allow or risk allowing a Stamkos, a Point, a Kucherov, a Hagel, or a Hedman or a Sergachev, or a Vasilevsky especially. You would never risk going into the final season of their current deal without having something lined up or have them already signed an extension to that deal. So I would say at this point in time that most likely, I don't think that Killorn's going to get the money anywhere near that maybe he would ask. I don't think he's going to get anything close to maybe what he's making right now, 4.5. But who knows? I mean, he might be able to really put an exclamation point on the end of a season. But at the same time, I would prefer to get something back in return for him right now that would help the Lightning down the road. But at the same time, you're running the risk of having a situation where you're not going to be able to get that value back, because really out there, we have to ask ourselves, and we'll talk about this in the second segment, is there a player out there that the Lightning could trade for where we could just do 1-for-1 up straight up, be able to afford that player for the rest of the season and for future seasons if they have more years on their contracts. And on top of that, be able to not get fleeced and everything that comes in with that. So we'll answer those questions there, because this is really something that, like I said, I'm sure the trade talk will be very much discussed in the upcoming weeks. But definitely want to get ahead of the curve right now and talk about that. So we'll talk about all of that in just a little bit. But first, I want to talk about today's sponsor, and that is FanDuel. I love FanDuel Sportsbook, not only because they have an easy to use app, they have all the best odds. They give you all the varieties in terms of props, same game parlays, all the stuff you could think of. But the fact that now I could finally say this week that we're really excited about them being the sports betting partner of the Locked On Podcast Network. And that's because they are the number one sports book in America. And if you're new to FanDuel, that's even better, because they have so many great features. Like I said, updated odds. And you could bet the in-game live betting is one of my favorite parts about it. I mean, if the Lightning go down a goal going into the second period, I'm going to put down a bet that they're going to win that period, because the Lightning are one of the best teams scoring wise in the second period this year. So definitely keep that in mind. If the Lightning are behind going into a second period, definitely expect a goal or two out of the boys in blue and white. So right now, football fans, because we got the NFL playoffs going on, even though the Bucks are out of it, we could still bet on football. So go ahead, place your first $5 bet to get $150 in free bets, win or lose, at FanDuel.com/locked on. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So once again, I want to thank everybody for making us your first listen of the day. If you haven't already done so, please go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Hit that notification bell and drop a thumbs up and a comment below. So as soon as the newest episode drops, you will be notified, as well as let us know, who do you want the Lightning to target? Because this is a conversation that we will be having unless JBB gets a deal done within the next couple of weeks or so, which I wouldn't be surprised, wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility for Julien Brisebois. I think that would probably maybe be the better move, but at the same time, because listen, we all know how the deadline works. There's 101 million moves being made at the deadline in the final hours, and from the moment it's like the stock exchange, pretty much. That's how I kind of think the GM's offices are, the madness of the New York Stock Exchange, people screaming, all that stuff. But I think that maybe that instead of waiting till the 11th hour to potentially get a deal done, or at least the last day of the deadline to get a deal done, maybe it would be fortuitous for Julien Brisebois to get ahead of the board, get ahead of the game, and maybe look at possibly getting a piece right now. Now, the one player, and I think that is out there for the Lightning to get now, whether it might cost Alex Killorn or maybe more, or maybe some pieces in Syracuse, is still yet to be determined. But the one thing that we could agree on is that the Lightning are lacking in both sides of their game. A little bit on defense, a little bit on offense. Wouldn't hurt you, especially with, having Maroon and Belmar, and just, the ever possibility of someone getting hurt down the line as the season progresses on, as we get into the dog days of March and April. Guys are going to get hurt. Guys are going to need certain nights off. One player comes to mind, and I think that a lot of Lightning fans will not only be happy for this to happen, but I think wouldn't be surprised if it happens, honestly. And everything that I'm seeing around the internet and hearing from people that are in the know, it seems as though is that more likely than not, Julien Brisebois will make a move at some point for Luke Schenn. And like I said, I think this would be a no-brainer. I mean, that is one of the good things I think about. Not only we all know what Luke Shen could do. Right now, he is the NHL hits leader, which is great. So he could throw his body around, he could throw his weight around there on the ice. But the added plus to that is that you know what you're going to get from him. You know that he's versatile. I mean, we saw with his time with the Lightning that John Cooper loved to switch him around. Sometimes throw him out there on the wing. Sometimes throw him out there as a almost, even though he's on the wing, acting almost as a third defenseman. Sometimes throwing him out there as a defenseman. So he's a very versatile player, and he's very a deep cup run will be nothing shocking or groundbreaking to his world, because obviously he was part of those two cup teams. And I really wish the Lightning could have somehow figured out how to keep him. Uh, um, but you know what? We all love a good comeback story. We all love a sports prodigal son comes back home story. And I think this would be nice. I think this would be nice, especially with kind of some of the moves that haven't so much panned out for Tampa this past offseason. And the moves I'm really talking about are Hayden Fleury, um, and just Vladislav Nemestikov. Just the two very underwhelming moves. Vlad has really, he has, like I said, he's had his moments this season where he does create plays for himself. He creates opportunities for himself to where we could potentially see him, score a goal here and there. Has just not been able to figure it out. I mean, the guy, the one thing that we could say about Vlad Nemestikov is that he's very good at hitting the the backboards of the end boards instead of the actual net itself. Um, and now he's been relegated to sandpaper duty on the fourth line. And I feel like, obviously he just signed with the Lightning this offseason, so the Lightning cannot move him. And I just feel like at this time that extra man, him having him on the fourth line with Pierre-Edouard Bellemare and Corey Perry, I just feel like, unfortunately, and this is no disrespect against Vladdy, I don't feel like it's a good use of a roster spot to have a guy like that on the fourth line. Nemestikov isn't exactly the biggest guy uh, on the team, and definitely, playing that more sandpaper role uh, isn't really something that I would like to see him do, because I don't feel like that's one of his big strengths. Now, maybe he'll mold into that role as time goes on and really be somewhat of an agitator. We'll have to see. But I look at this line, I look at these lines, and I look at this roster, and one can't help but think is Luke Shen would fit perfectly into this, because you could start to maybe designate time between Nemestikov and Shen if Shen comes in, or if Shen is brought in. You can move Pat Maroon back down to the third line. Maybe put Perry on the third, uh, and have Shen on that fourth line with Edouard, Bellemare, and Nemestikov. I mean, excuse me, Nemestikov and Maroon, and I don't know. That would also leave a weird situation for Nemestikov, because I feel like you bring in Shen, it's pretty much Cooper and company saying, all right, this isn't working out. We're going to phase you out into kind of a depth player position where you're not going to be guaranteed to play every night. Now, it's unfortunate, but I think it's a move that makes sense. I think that especially with Shen, he's not going to be an every night guy. He's not going to be playing every single night. I think during the playoffs, we'll see the same thing. But I think it's a move that definitely makes sense for the Tampa Bay Lightning as they try to get back to the playoffs, which they 100% will. And it's a move. The good thing about this is that the Lightning don't need to make a move that is going to, they're not in a position where we need to make a move because then we're not going to get in the playoffs. That's not the case. We all know the recipe now. Get in and then make some noise. Julien Brisebois has stated he's not going to try and chase after Toronto and Boston, which is fine. Boston is just on a whole nother level now playing. I mean, they continue to roll. I've made my peace with that, which is fine. As for Toronto, I'm still confident that Tampa could make some sort of ground at some point or as the season weighs on. Now, because if we're looking at the rest of the free agents, the guys that are available out there, the one player that sticks out to me, and I'm very curious as to what some of you might think about this, is Ivan Barbashev from the Blues. Big guy, very physical, could throw up some points here and there. A guy that we could see potentially slide into the spot for maybe Corey Perry if he chooses to retire at some point over the next couple of years. Something to think about, Lightning fans. I really like Ivan Barbashev's game. He does get hurt here and there. And plus, if it doesn't work out, if you bring him in, doesn't work out, he's a UFA after this year. So that's the one, I guess, positive is that, you're not stuck with this guy. As is in a situation where, like I said, Nemestikov, he could very well come back next season and figure it out and start to play better. But right now, it's not working. There's most games out there where he just is invisible, and the Lightning can't afford to have that kind of a situation what they had with Alex Killorn, which some Lightning fans I've seen respond on the YouTube page with Killorn. They said that was kind of a fluke. Who knows? Maybe we'll be saying the next thing with Nemestikov next season. So let us know in the comments below what you think about this upcoming trade deadline for the Lightning, because I think it's definitely the most important one we've had yet. It's definitely going to test Julien Brisebois' merit as a GM, and I'm going to have a lot of fun being able to see how how Julien Brisebois not only navigates the market and not try to get swindled by opposing teams, but also be able to bring in something or someone that is going to be able to contribute right away and be able to not be that costly. As well as, I think my trade deadline wish is that we get some more draft picks. So, maybe that's just me being greedy. Let me know in the comments below what you think about that. We just got done with the grades for midseason. Maybe, in a couple of weeks, we'll be having our trade deadline grades for the Tampa Bay Lightning. So wrapping things up on the show, there's a lot of very enticing names out there on the trade block for a lot of the teams. And unfortunately, in years past, if we were talking 1920 and the trade deadline, the cap was what it was, or if the cap was supposed to grow the way it should have been, minus COVID, we could very well be having the conversation right now about Timo Meier, because that is someone that jumps off the page to me. Bo Horvat from Vancouver, a center. You can never have too many good centers on a team. I firmly believe it. Centers are really what catapult your team from being pretenders to contenders. And if the deal could get done where the Lightning could maybe trade Alex Killorn and get someone back, a center especially, of Bo Horvat's caliber, or maybe a Ryan O'Reilly or a Jonathan Taves, which let's just cross that off the list. That ain't going to happen. Or a Sean Moynihan, that'd be perfect. But I'm aiming a little lower for an Ivan Barbashev, a Luke Schenn. Now, in terms of money being able to have to work out, does a team have to retain some of that salary? We'll have to wait and see how convincing Julien Brisebois will be in those talks, and by the result of what we get back in a trade. And we'll definitely talk about that as stories continue to come out and rumors start to fly out in the coming weeks, because we will definitely hear our fair share of rumors. And in the meantime, please go ahead and like and subscribe to the podcast. Give us a follow on our Instagram page at @LO_Lightning. locked_on_lightning on Instagram, LO_lightning on Twitter. Give me a follow on Twitter at dankydank, DENKYD8NK. Tweet to me who is on your trade deadline wish list. Really love to hear from all of you. And, hit those DMs up for mailbags as well, because we'll definitely be starting that back up in the coming weeks, especially with the trade deadline looming just right around the corner. So in the meantime, that's been it for this episode of Locked On Lightning, part of Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Tanker. I'll talk to you in the next one.